Hello everybody and welcome to History/Law Bite number 150, dated January 4th, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History/Law Bite is entitled The Guarantee Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Now, most Americans have never heard of the Guarantee Clause, let alone know exactly what it does. Well, simply put, the Guarantee Clause, located in Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, requires that the federal government at all times make sure each and every single one of the United States of America has a Republican form of government, as well as protect each and every single state from foreign invasion and from internal discord and unrest if the states themselves apply for federal assistance in quelling domestic violence. Okay? So, specifically, allow me to read the Guarantee Clause of the U.S. Constitution to you. If you'll turn to Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution and follow along. The Guarantee Clause reads as follows: The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or of the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. All right. So that, folks, is the Guarantee Clause. So what's all that mean? Well, that means let's address the guarantee aspect number one. The United States federal government is obligated to make sure that these guys, the individual U.S. states, always have a valid Republican form of government. What the heck does that mean? Republican form of government? Well, a Republican form of government, as commonly known and accepted throughout time, is a form of government in which the people govern via regular elections. What did I say? A Republican form of government is a form of government in which power rests in the hands of the people. The people govern via elections. And those elections should be held at regular intervals. That is the core, the essential, base model setup for a Republican system. The people are essentially sovereign, and they govern via their elected representatives and typically an executive as well. All right? Now, that thereby requires that the United States not permit any U.S. state from establishing something like a monarchy, a military dictatorship, a system permanently vesting all authority with the aristocracy, all right, or a dictatorship of another kind, okay? These setups would all be expressly forbidden by the Guarantee Clause of the Constitution. The states must always have a Republican form of government. Power must be vested in the hands of the people, and the people govern via elections held at regular intervals, where they elect their representatives and their executive. Okay, now that we understand what a Republican form of government is and what a Republican form of government is not, okay, historically, the states have had wide latitude in designing their unique Republican structures, okay? Virtually all 50 states have the same setup, okay? A governor, a state legislature, and a judicial branch, all right? And that has gone, for the most part, unchanged, okay? The Civil War, of course, actually required the federal government to somewhat invoke the guarantee clause as a means of legitimately justifying its occupation and redesigning of the southern state governments after the Civil War. Well, the Southerners themselves redesigned their governments, but of course there was a tremendous amount of influence and pressure from the federal government in doing so. And the federal government was obligated after the war to ensure that those defeated former Confederate states reestablished proper Republican forms of government. Okay? Now, the guarantee clause, when it comes to its judicial interpretation, all right, the Supreme Court has viewed the guarantee clause somewhat like a red-hot stove because, as you recall from its words, it's a very political piece of the U.S. Constitution, not one whereby the courts would really want to do much tinkering and tampering with the language. And indeed, who is proper to define what a Republican form of government is? The Supreme Court, on more than one occasion, has said it is not the proper institution. Indeed, the Supreme Court first interpreted the guarantee clause in 1849 with the case of Luther versus Borden, okay, when there was major dispute over the constitutionality of a constitution adopted by the state of Rhode Island. And the Supreme Court essentially said, we're not getting in that, okay? What constitutes a Republican form of government is something that is to be decided by the political branches of the federal government, aka the President and Congress, not the judicial branch, us, the Supreme Court. That's not a justiciable question, best decided by a court of law. What constitutes a Republican form of government is a political question, okay? Political questions are not best decided by courts of law. Okay? I mean, they can be, but they shouldn't be. It is better handled by the political branches of government. Okay? And with that in mind, if you're wondering why that is, think of it like this. Let's say you have an 11, 12-year-old boy, lives in a two-parent household. All right? Mother and a father. 11 or 12 years old, it's time for the birds and the bees talk. Now, both parents, arguably, are qualified to talk to him together, all right? Or mom could talk to him individually, or dad could talk to him individually, all right? But, as he is a little boy, 11 or 12 years old, who will soon become a man, it is best that his father have this chat with him, in my humble opinion, as he obviously has been a little boy at one time, and thus can best educate his son on what he has to expect down the road as he matures into a teenager and into a young man. Okay? The father is thus the best one to decide this, to discuss this with his son. Just like the political branches of government are the best branches to decide what constitutes a Republican form of government, all right? Now, mom can have this conversation with her son, She can certainly provide him with what he needs to know, at very minimum, the base model amount of information, but it just is not quite the same, as mom is not a man, and therefore, if he has certain questions, mom may not be able to answer them quite obviously. So it's the same way with this. The courts are not the best entity to decide political questions. I hope my analogy was helpful. And even if we invert it, okay, and make it a little girl, obviously mom is the best one to have the birds and the bees talk with, all right? Not her father. He can do it, But trust and believe, it's going to be a whole lot he probably cannot answer. All right. So now you understand. All right. So again, the Supreme Court historically has not done too much twisting and bending out of shape of the guarantee clause in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, instead leaving it to the political branches of the federal government to interpret it and decide what constitutes a Republican form of government. All right. In the case of Colgrove versus Green in 1946, the Supreme Court said quite clearly that a Republican form of government essentially cannot be challenged in court. Recent movements in the law, however, have led the Supreme Court to, rather than issue blanket statements of lack of ability to decide, matters under the guarantee clause, for the court instead to say that it would decide each matter individually to decide whether or not it was justiciable, matters brought up under the guarantee clause. So that, folks, is what we have. All right. And again, this is the guarantee clause located in Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. It requires that, quite simply, the U.S. federal government ensure that each and every U.S. state has a working Republican form of government. Okay. It is also required to protect each U.S. state from a foreign invasion, obviously. And lastly, if one or more of the states require the intervention of the federal government, such as the National Guard, all right, to intervene and quell domestic violence, aka riots and whatnot in the state, then the federal government is also required to send in the troops. All right? So that's what the guarantee clause does. Once more, it obligates federal government to make sure each and every state has a working Republican form of government. Okay, number one. Number two, requires the U.S. federal government to protect each and every state from foreign invasion, obviously. And last but not least, if the states apply for it, number three, the federal government is required to send in the National Guard, all right, to help the state put down any domestic unrest, aka riots and civil uprisings and whatnot, all right? That is what the guarantee clause effectively obligates the federal government to do. Federal government is truly seen in the guarantee clause as Big Brother, to make sure that all is well at all times with respect to the structure, functioning, and stability of the U.S. states. Once again, the guarantee clause of the U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4 of the document. All right? If you have any questions or controversies, please leave them down below and I'll be happy to answer them. All right. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please just hit that little red subscribe button and the little bell so you'll receive notices when I post new videos. OK, thanks again for listening, folks. I really, 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 really appreciate it. All right. Take care. Stay safe out there. And I'll talk to you at the next bite. Peace.